Mrs. Johnson, when she came to Fairhope, she got acquainted with the Swifts through this aunt, as I said, in St. Paul. And she came to the Swifts. Although grandfather liked Mrs. Johnson, she lived in our house for a year, and took care of her child and all. He wouldn't let me go to her school. He didn't believe in that kind of education. He thought it was foolish. So I had to go to the other. And he didn't believe in single tax ideas. Although he liked the single tax people, he knew them in Des Moines, Iowa, knew what he was getting into, yet he never joined the colony, and his property was not single tax land.
It was deeded property.
It was deeded, and still is.
When Mrs. Johnson lived with you all, what kind of routine did she have? I mean, how did her day go?
Well, she taught public school, you see, and so her routine was just, she'd get up in the morning and go to school and stay all day, and then come home at night. And when she was home at night, well, she took care of the little boy some, but she was all the time studying, and at night she studied all the time. Just studied these books that I just mentioned.
When you taught the life classes, did you have projects that your children worked on?
Oh, yes.
How did they come up with those projects?
They came up fine. Some would come up, they'll need more help than others, and you see that's where the classes are small. You can give the ones that need the help more. And sometimes the ones that get it quickly would help the slower ones.
Did the children themselves choose the projects that they wanted to learn?
And not the ones they wanted really to learn, not the reading and writing arithmetic, but they choose their craft works, their shop works, and many things where it's left up to the child's choice. And that's where it kept the teacher on the jump to meet the child's ideas and to guide him in certain ways.
Can you remember any particular project that kept you on the jump?
No, not especially. It seemed to me I was on the jump all the time.
Okay.
We learned so much geography, I know, and we made our own geography maps. We made our own paper pulp, and the children would get the boards down in the shop to mount the continents on, and they'd make the continents of this paper pulp, and they put the mountains and the rivers, and then we named them, and that way we learned a lot of geography, you see. They constructed the map themselves on this board out of paper mache, and then it would dry, and they would name the rivers, and then we'd take the map that had the counties, the countries in them, and we'd compare it with the one that we had made, the physical map, and we'd compare the two together, and that's the way we studied geography. And I got some very simple books on geometry out of Milton Bradley in Atlanta. They carry a wonderful school catalog, and I found they had some for small children, so I ordered enough geometry, the fundamentals of geometry for the children, and they made it in their books, and they also did it on the blackboard.
Miss, ask her about how she worked with the teacher trainees. What was the program of working with teacher trainees, Mrs. Johnson? How she trained them?
How did Mrs. Johnson work with the teacher trainees? Like when you were in teacher training, how did she work with you all?
Well, we had regular classes. We studied these 4 books that she had as her Bible. We had to study too. And she would have classes on those. We'd have to report. And then she gave us, we'd take a room at a time. 1 or 2 of us would take a room and help the teacher that was in there and do work that way, and work with them and carry out the ideas that we studied in the book and the ideas that we'd worked with Mrs. Johnson with. You carried the ideas right on through. It wasn't all book work. You did them yourselves too.
Can you describe what a typical day would be like in, teaching? How, from the morning all the way?
Yes, you'd have your opening exercises. At that time, they'd say the Lord's Prayer and things like that, which they don't allow in schools anymore now. And I had one little girl that was a rebel, and she wouldn't salute the flag. She would not salute the flag. And I said, well, Betty, I said, you're making yourself very prominent by not standing up. I said, if you will just stand up, you don't have to salute the flag. But I said, please stand up with the rest and don't be the only one sitting down. It's the only way I met that situation. I had to let it slide because there's no reason to command her to. If she didn't believe in it, her parents didn't believe in it. So I didn't force the issue there, but I didn't make her stand up with the rest of them. And then we'd have have mathematics. Well, there may be 4 or 5 classes in mathematics in that 12 or 15 children. And you'd have to group them accordingly, and each one would work in his own group, and you'd have to go from one group to the other to help him out that way. We really had no set idea because there were so few, you couldn't work the whole room as a whole, as a group. You had to meet the needs of the slow child and of the one that was ahead of the others. They all had to be kept in the same group with the same age, meet the same thing socially, but academically it was up to the teacher to keep the child happy and healthy and meet his needs as well. And it was darn hard sometimes.
What about lunches? Did the children bring their own lunches, or did they go home?
We had an hour's lunch, and most of them went home, and those that didn't would bring the lunch. In those days, we didn't have school lunches.
What about after lunch?
About what?
What about after lunch? Was there a time of rest, or what would happen after lunch?
Well, no.
Excuse me just a minute. I think we're fixing to get wet. It's starting to rain.
It is?
Yeah, let me get you on in so you don't get wet.